All right, welcome. I want to talk about the coaches. We're a couple games over, a quarter of the way through the NHL season this year. I want to talk about kind of the Coach of the Year award, where we're at with certain coaches and teams and so on. So it's really early. A lot's going to change before the end of the year, but I don't know. I've seen a few posts on it. I decided to kind of go through the stats, the rosters, and kind of form my own opinion. And here we are. So I got the top six coaches, I think, in my opinion, that are likely contending for the Jack Adams Award so far. Jack Adams being Coach of the Year. I have other guys who are just have done well this year or are excellent coaches in general. And then I have kind of an honorable mentioned as well. A lot of people in comments and stuff have mentioned these coaches. I just want to touch on them because a lot of them aren't bad. I just didn't have them in my, top 11. So let's dive into it. This isn't in any particular order, but the top six essentially I have contending for the Jack Adams Award. First off is Coach Jared Bednar of the Colorado Avalanche. That team is 16-1-5. Their one regulation loss against my Boston Bruins. Yes, great. Jared Bednar for years has been an elite coach. He's been one of the best coaches in the league. I think even even if they were like 11-5-5 or something, I'd probably still have him on my board. He is so intelligent with how he deploys his players, his defensemen, how he wants his team to play in certain scenarios, right? Hold the puck in the offensive zone, that's a form of defense. And he coaches that really well. Jared Bednar, I in no way, shape, or form cheer or root for the Avalanche, but Jared Bednar is easily one of the best coaches in the NHL. Consistently every single year. Next up is my Boston Bruins, Marco Sturm. You got to give him a lot of credit. I had this team projected for last place, I think, in the Eastern Conference. I did not understand how they were going to score, and yet they're sitting in a wild card spot right now. On paper, this team is awful. This team is rough if you're just looking at it on paper through the roster. A lot of guys having career years, comparatively speaking, to their career stats. Pastrnak is doing Pastrnak things. Morgan Geekie is on a 50-goal pace, which I don't know. I didn't think he was going to be able to sustain his 30-goal season from last year, let alone grow on top of it. You have guys like Isamont and Tanner Jeannot, and Rat Hustadinov and all these guys having career years offensively. And it's a really big attribute to the way Marco Sturm likes to coach and likes to play. It's a high flying offense. It's a strong defensive team. You have a strong defense and goaltending for the most part. You can take some risks on your back end to transition to offense, and it's worked. They've given up a lot more goals than you'd expect, but that's at a cost of scoring goals as well. And I think for this team, you can afford to do that, and it's worked out really well. So shout out to Marco Sturm. It's very untraditional in the sense of how the Bruins have historically played, but it's working, and he's done a great job. You got to give him credit. He's done. Where are they in terms of goals for? They are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7th in the league in goals for, which is just absurd. Go look at their roster. You'll be like, I don't understand how, because I still don't understand how. Next up is the New Jersey Devils, Sheldon Keefe. I've expressed some concerns about Sheldon Keefe from his time in Toronto on this channel. He's proven me wrong. He really is. He's either grown a substantial amount in the past couple of years or is just a good coach. And honestly, I think he's just a good coach. I think the pieces he had in Toronto weren't necessarily able to adapt to Keefe's style of play, whereas they are in New Jersey, and it's really showing how strong of a coach he can be. Playoffs are a different question. I don't think we really got a chance to see Sheldon Keefe with a decent team in the playoffs last year. So I'm curious to see if the team's healthy, how they are this year in the playoffs, and how he coaches. But regular season, Sheldon Keefe has been an outstanding coach this year, and I got to give the guy credit. Next up is The Anaheim Ducks, Joel Quenneville. It's no surprise. We all know he's a good coach. I think some of the concern was he's taken a break from coaching in the NHL for so long. How would he come back? How would he respond? And he's done well. He's really, this team, the Ducks as a team, their defensive core is not great. Dostal in net is absolutely fantastic. He is unbelievable. But the defensive core in general, when it comes to playing defense, isn't great. I've watched a lot of Ducks games this year. There's a lot of offensive guys. There's not a whole lot of strong defensemen that can play defense. But Joel Quenneville has really taken a stride into having that team play team defense, having the forwards come back, be responsible. They have a ton of offensive firepower. Their question for me was the defense, and you can score a lot of goals, but if you're giving up a lot of goals, you're just losing a lot of games. So Quenneville has found a nice balance there, and it's really starting to shine. He's done a great job. It's a fun team to watch. They're defending better as a team because you have to make up for some of those inconsistencies on the back end, but they're also putting the puck in the net and scoring. And Leo Carlsson, absolute star. That kid is so fun to watch. I love that dude. He's one of my favorite players in the league. I love Leo Carlsson. He's playing shorthanded time over here. Like Joel Quenneville has really changed up kind of the format of this team, and it's worked and been very successful. They're a good team. I don't think they're an elite team. I don't think they're a Stanley Cup contender just yet, but Quenneville has without a doubt put them on the right track. They should be a playoff team. The way they're playing consistently night in and night out, even if they lose, you can still see that this is a strong team. So I'd be surprised if they miss the playoffs. I think Quenneville is deservedly on this list. Next up, and this is my more controversial take, I guess, because of where the Sharks are in the standings, but San Jose Sharks coach Ryan Warovsky, if you look at that defense on paper is probably one of the two worst defenses in the league. That and Pittsburgh, just on paper. I don't know how he's doing it, but he's getting buy-in from his really young forwards to play team defense, and they're doing it very well. Celebrini coming back, like back checking, playing defense, playing man-to-man, tying up sticks. That kid is, 19? And you're not just getting that from Celebrini, you're getting that from other players like Will Smith and Eklund, and it's really impressive. I got to give Ryan Warovsky a lot of credit with what he's done with this roster. Again, it's a young roster. Young players usually, when they come into the league, struggle a little more with the defensive side of the game. Regardless of your position, usually there's an adjustment that has to be made defensively to match an NHL pace. And Warovsky's done a great job really developing that group. That team needs defensemen in their lineup, and they have some young guys like Sam Dickinson and so on, but once they really start getting their defensive core figured out, this is going to be a good team. And Warovsky's done a great job developing these guys so far. I'm really impressed. This is a team I thought was going to be at the bottom of the barrel again because of their defense, and goaltending was a big question. Askarov has been great, but part of Askarov's success has also been that defense playing serviceable in front of him. So Warovsky, I think, has been one of the better coaches in the NHL to this point, and I think at the very least deserves a look. I'm by no ways a Warovsky fan or a Sharks fan, but you got to give credit where credit's due, and it's a fun team to watch, and they're winning games, and they're at least competitive, which is more than a lot of people had expectations for. The last up is the Carolina Hurricanes coach, Rod Brind'Amour. Again, just very consistent behind the bench, just very consistent. You kind of know what you're going to get. You're going to get a defensively strong team. You're going to have some offense here and there, but it's defense first with Brind'Amour. He knows he's probably one of the best coaches in the league at working the refs. He knows when to sass them. He knows when to keep his mouth quiet. He kind of knows when a makeup call should be coming and can get a little frustrated with the refs when one doesn't come. And all of a sudden, after he expresses his frustration, there's a makeup call for Brind'Amour's team. So again, being a Bruins fan, I can't stand it, but he knows how to work the system and he does it really well, and not in like a cheating kind of way because I don't think like there's no question he's like not cheating, but at the same time, you know, he knows what strings to pull at the right time, and I think that's important in a coach. I think it takes a while to really know how to pull those strings for a coach, and he's figured it out and mastered it. Not just that, you know, he's rotating three defenses. I don't think there's been a whole lot of help from the GM in terms of really upgrading defensemen, or aside from the Ehlers edition, you know, who's your second line center, for example. And we have the answer now, but you know, coming into the season, it was Kotkaniemi, for example. So you know, Brind'Amour is an excellent coach. There's no question there. Again, I really don't root for any. Actually, I really don't root for any of these teams except for Boston. Whatever. But you know, credit where credit's due. A lot of these coaches have been absolutely outstanding this year, and some of them consistently, with Brind'Amour and Jared Bednar, consistently just some of the most elite coaches in the league, and they're showing again this year why they are. Other coaches I wanted to mention, Tampa Bay, John Cooper. Where are they in the division? What? Okay. They are first in the Atlantic right now. It changes every time a team plays and wins. So we'll see how long that lasts. You know, Detroit could get an overtime, or Detroit could just win tonight, and Tampa might lose, and boom, Detroit's in first place, for example. But John Cooper, along with Jared Bednar, there's a reason they've been coaches for so long. It's because they're so gosh darn good behind the bench. They know how to deploy their players. They're just some of the most elite coaches in the league. And I'm repeating myself, but there's a reason he's been behind that bench for as long as he has. He is just an absolutely outstanding coach. Seems like a good guy. I don't really know, but always has that little smile behind the bench. And again, I'm a Bruins fan. We don't necessarily like the Lightning as a team, but you can't. It's impossible to hate John Cooper. It really is. He's just so freaking good at his job, and he always has that little smile every once in a while. Yeah, he's a lovable guy. What can you say? Pittsburgh, got to give credit to Dan Muse. You know, sometimes you see a new coach and there's a bit of a coaching bump, even if it's the beginning of the season. But I actually took a few notes on Dan Muse's success. Not too many notes, just very general. But this Pittsburgh Penguins team has $11.25 million in cap space. They were not intending to be all that competitive. It's a strong draft. You know, a year of not doing so well kind of benefits their future. So they have a lot of money to spend. That in addition to the kind of lackluster free agency. Last year they were the third worst team in goals against. They were terrible defensively, and if you look at their defensive unit, it's not good. This year they are the second best in goals against in the league. That's not just the Eastern Conference. That is incredible. I'm moving my thing all over. I don't know what's going on. Don't mind me. This is why I don't read off of the screen and take notes and stuff. This is why I have the board. But sometimes there's a little more detail you got to dive into. Dan Muse, he's gotten production out of some of these forwards, like Anthony Mantha, Justin Brazeau when he was playing, that you didn't really... Like Anthony Mantha, you kind of knew it was there, but you kind of thought it was a little dried up, especially after so many injuries. Justin Brazeau, you didn't really know that was there at all. Guys like that are really coming out and showing up. But it's the team defense as well, and I think this team has really started to cover up a lot of their defensive deficiencies, which are ample. And that's really just attributed to the style of coaching Dan Muse has brought to this Pittsburgh Penguins team. Just for context, they have Parker Wotherspoon. He was a third line / depth defenseman in Boston for a few years. He's playing over 20 minutes a night on that left side, clocking some good minutes in there. He's a defensive defenseman. They also have Matt Dumba in their lineup. Matt Dumba, former offensive defenseman, not so great defensively for the most part. Serviceable, sure. Um, they have Eric Carlson, who is an offensive defenseman. Defense can be questionable at times. He is 35. They have Chris Letang. His defensive side of the game has really dried up. He's 38. Can still shoot the puck with the best of them, but there's a lot of not so premier defensive defensemen on this team. So you got to give credit to Dan Muse. I just don't know how sustainable this is, so I still have him over here. We'll see halfway through the season. If they're competing for a wild card spot, without a doubt, Dan Muse should have consideration for the Jack Adams Award. But I'm still moving my screens over. I got 3 screens worth of space, and I whatever. Next up, Spencer Carberry with the Washington Capitals. Again, I think it's well known at this point. This guy's just a good coach. He really has that team bought into playing together as a team and a unit. I don't think there's much to say about Spencer Carberry that already hasn't been said. Everybody knows he's a good coach, and he shows it again every game, every year. This team kind of got off to a bit of a slow start, has been turning around lately. Are they in a wild card spot? Where are they? They're in the first wild card spot. The Bruins are in the second. They're both tied with 26 points. This should be a playoff team. So, yeah. Spencer Carberry, not much to say. Same with Paul Maurice. Pretty much what I said about Rod Brind'Amour, knowing when to pull the strings with the refs and stuff. Paul Maurice is the same way. Both of those guys are the masters of really understanding how a game's reffed and how to respond through coaching. It's absolutely magical to watch. You hate it because, again, Carolina and Florida, I'm a Bruins fan. I don't like either of these teams, but you have to respect how good they are at pulling those strings and understanding kind of the ebb and flow of how a hockey game usually is, or how it's going, kind of how the game is going to progress. Both of these guys, and I'm going back to Rod Brind'Amour too, very good with matchups, very good with deploying players. Florida with Paul Maurice specifically, on paper, defensively, there's questions. You have it's not bad. You have some stronger guys, but guys like Kulikov, for example, questionable at times. So Maurice has adjusted for his style, had adjusted the style of play for the Panthers, going back years at this point. Hard on the forecheck, 2 guys forechecking. You're going to give up some more defensive lapses, but you're probably going to force more turnovers in your offensive zone and lead to more scoring chances. This team is a very strong forward group. We know that. This year they're dealing with a lot of injuries, but they're remaining somewhat competitive. I know they're not in the playoffs right now. They're 1 point out of the playoffs. So they're hanging in there. When some guys get back, get healthy, they're going to be a force to reckon with. Bobrovsky not having a great season so far, in that this is typical Sergei Bobrovsky. He gets off to a slow start every year and then turns it up as the year goes on, and then is at full psycho mode in net come playoff time. That's been Sergei Bobrovsky's MO for years now. So I'm not worried about the Panthers, but Paul Maurice is without a doubt one of the league's best coaches. There's only a handful of them in my mind. Most of them are on this board. Bednar, Cooper, Brind'Amour, Paul Maurice, and you can make a case for Bruce Cassidy. I don't think Bruce Cassidy's quite at that level, but an excellent coach to say the least. Where are they in the standings? Vegas is in the first wild card spot. Kind of been iffy, but Bruce Cassidy is very good with matchups, exceptionally good with line pairings and matchups and finding those chemistries between players. He's a very good defensive coach. This team has a lot of offensive weapons, but a lot of those forwards are very responsible defensively, and Bruce utilizes those. It's just one of those things where Bruce Cassidy has established himself over the years dating back to his Boston days as one of the best coaches in the league. More traditional style of play, sure. Not as fun, high flying as some other teams or coaches, such as Marco Sturm, for example. And there's plenty of examples throughout the league. But without a doubt, Bruce Cassidy is one of the best coaches in the league. I'd say he probably gets consideration if Vegas finishes in the top 2 in the Pacific, which really isn't out of the question. They're 1 point behind. They're 2 points behind first place right now, the Ducks. So yeah, Bruce Cassidy is just an excellent coach. He has been for years and should always be considered for the Jack Adams, at least in my opinion. He's had another strong season coaching. So we're moving on to other coaches that have been mentioned. First one is Detroit with Todd McLellan, and this is where I took notes a little more. So, there's been a lot to like about Todd. There's been a lot that I've had questions about, even dating back to his LA Kings days. This Detroit team had defensive concerns coming into the season, and there really hasn't been much done to fix those defensive concerns. We're kind of seeing the goaltenders lapse as a result, as you do with teams that struggle with defense, for example. Excuse me. And some of the young guys kind of have been the only option. You have to play the young guys because you don't really have anyone else to play. Axel Sandin Pellikka, Simon Edvinsson, and shout out to them for kind of jumping into that role. I absolutely love Simon Edvinsson. I think that kid is an absolute stud. He's a great player. He's going to be a force for a long time. Sandin Pellikka, more of an offensive defenseman, has struggled a bit defensively. We'll see if he can continue to grow his game, but at least he's getting somewhat of an opportunity, mostly on that second pairing, which I think has been okay. But there still needs to be something done to cover up some of those defensive lapses with the team, at least in my opinion, and that hasn't been addressed through coaching so far. In regards to the forwards, it's been great that Finney has been getting a good look, somewhat on the first, mostly on the first line. He's looked good. 7th round pick. Kid's still young. What a draft pick. Yeah. Steve Yzerman, I think I made a video about Steve Yzerman not too long ago about how I questioned where this team was going and how much of an impact he really was having. I think you're seeing some of those pieces come to fruition, but yeah, that's conversation for another time because we're talking about coaches. But you still, with Todd, you need a little more faith in those youthful guys, right? Yeah, you want to make the playoffs. Yes, you came close a couple of years ago. This team has potential. They do have weapons. You have Raymond, you have Seider, you have Dylan Larkin. Like you have some of these pieces. You still have Patrick Kane playing, who can still snipe the puck. But you need to start developing some of these younger guys a little more. JT Compher, he has something like 6 points in 23 games or something. Like, it's not great. He's still the second line center. What about guys like Nate Danielson, who's 21, playing pretty solid so far given his limited minutes? Marco Kasper, was it last year or a couple years ago? I think it was last year. Posted 47 points. I'm not sure if that's entirely accurate, but Marco Kasper had a pretty good year, not too long ago, right? Excuse me. Like, they need to start giving these guys meaningful minutes. And, if you're playing, 7-8 shifts a night, you're not really getting those reps. You're not really getting those looks, and that development takes a lot longer for those young guys. And I think that development is important, and we've seen some of these successful teams show a lot more faith in these younger players than in previous years, and it's worked out well for them. Montreal is a prime example of that, even though they've kind of had to. There are other teams that, the Boston Bruins, Murat Hustadinov, 23-year-old, only played fourth-line minutes for his career, getting first-line opportunity looks with the Boston Bruins, for example, and they're in a wild card spot. I do have some reservations about Todd McLellan. They have the weapons in place, again, to be competing for a wild card spot, but I think there's a lot more that the coach can do to kind of bring this team up to the next level that Todd McClellan hasn't really done just yet. He's more of an old school conventional coach, and in some cases it works out. And I have questions about this so far with Todd in Detroit. I don't know if he's necessarily the right fit. He hasn't been bad by any means, but I wouldn't have him in the Coach of the Year conversation at this point. Next up is Patrick Waugh. Oh, no, I'm going ahead. It is Patrick Waugh of the New York Islanders. Whew, skipping a few lines there. Again, Patrick Waugh, I've never disliked him as a coach. I mean, I do dislike him as a coach, but he's been a good, effective coach. I just wouldn't put him, again, in the Coach of the Year category, especially this year. I think a lot of their shortcomings last year were somewhat addressed through the general manager position. They got Heineman, they signed Drouin, they got Shabanov, and they drafted Matthew Schaefer and signed him and gave him a look and put him in the NHL in year one. And I think all of those have very much helped offensively. I think there's still some pieces there that need to be addressed. But the stats would tell you that offensively they're a little, around, if not a little below average. Defensively, they're a solid team. They've always kind of been a solid defensive team. You got strong defensive guys. You have a strong defensive forward in Bo Horvat who can play on the penalty kill. You have defensive defensemen really that make up your entire back unit, except for Schaefer. And Schaefer is 18 years old. Like he'll learn the defensive part of the game. Part of it's already there. Part of it's still a work in progress. But he's 18, and he's putting up points. He's got some offensive talent. So, I don't think Patrick Waugh has really elevated this team to a point where we should be discussing him for a Coach of the Year position. But I don't think he's a bad coach by any means. But yeah, we're moving on to Dallas. Gulutzin. I still struggle to say his name. I've heard it like 1,000 times. I still struggle to say it. Yeah, the team's good. He has a stacked team. They should be good. I'd be more concerned if the team wasn't doing well than if they were doing well. What are they, 14-5 or something? 14-5-4. They're 3-4 in overtime. This is, I don't know. This is kind of what we expected out of the Dallas Stars and their roster. So there's not really any surprises here. Nothing's really jumped off the page with me, comparatively speaking, to when Pete DeBoer was the coach. Not to say Pete DeBoer or Gulutzin has been a bad coach by any means. A bad coach can ruin a team, but there hasn't been anything here that's really jumped off the table and been like, oh, wow, that's impressive from a coaching standpoint. I think it's kind of just been somewhat of the same. Some of it has, some of the systems, that's the word I'm looking for. Some of the systems you can tell have been a little changed up and so on, but for the most part, I don't know. I more credit the GM, as I do with the New York Islanders, to the team's success than I do necessarily the coach. Next up, Seattle. Lane Lambert. He's a good coach. He really helped shore up that defense. There's a reason the goaltenders were not great last year, aside from Joey Daccord, and now are excellent. It's because the defense in front of them is playing a lot more responsible hockey, and they, on the defensive end, they look excellent. Their forwards are buying into playing that team defense, but the offense has taken a bit of a hit as a result. Not to say their offense was elite or even average last year, but now it's, one of the worst offenses in the league from a production standpoint. So there's pros and cons here. But it's more of a trade-off than it is a growth, at least in my opinion. Just kind of looking from the stats, and you can see the defensive side of the game be taken more seriously when you watch Seattle Kraken play versus, kind of flying up the ice and trying to score a goal or getting or beating a guy on the rush or whatever. You can kind of tell there's differences in the coaching style, but you know, deserves a mention, sure, but I wouldn't have him in the coaching of the year conversation just yet. We'll see. Again, this is another guy you could see if the Seattle Kraken finish like, I don't know, top 3, he might be in the conversation. If they finish top 2 in the Pacific over Anaheim or Vegas, he might be in that conversation for Coach of the Year. But I still have questions. St. Louis, Jim Montgomery in general is a good coach, and he shouldn't be in the conversation for Coach of the Year this year because the team's had issues. But, you know, overall, and for really his entire NHL coaching career, he's been an excellent coach. He's more of a player's motivational coach. Last year, this Blues team, a lot of those players had career years, and that was it. And they're kind of back to doing their thing, right? Those players, those stats have kind of come back down to earth. But Montgomery manages the lines well. Again, he's kind of like Bruce Cassidy in that sense where he's good at figuring out those chemistries between players, or if there is potential chemistry, he'll give those players several games together on the line to develop that chemistry, and then it kind of comes to fruition. It's Bruce Cassidy, or not Bruce Cassidy, Jim Montgomery in general is an excellent coach. I don't know. I just figured I'd mention him because he is, I think, in my opinion, one of the better coaches in the league. At the same time, he's probably, unless this team somehow turns it around and they make the wild card spot, and even then, because of the slow start under Montgomery's watch, I don't necessarily know that he'll be in contention for that. Because this Blues team was expected to compete for a wild card spot, a lot of people had them making the playoffs this year. So I don't even know at that point. Last up is the Montreal Canadiens with Marty St. Louis. I don't think there's a whole lot to say about here. Like, we know Martin St. Louis is a fantastic offensive coach. We know he values developing those younger guys. And it's really shown. A lot of these younger guys in Montreal have grown their game substantially in a pretty short amount of time. So you got to give credit where credit's due. But as a coach, I think he really struggles with the defensive aspect of it. Not just managing the defensive systems, but also kind of getting that team to buy into team defense as well. You need your forwards to be a little more defensively responsible, and we've seen that from some guys. Right? We consistently see that from Suzuki. Love that dude. Hate the Canadians because Boston, but man, I love Suzuki. You see that from a guy like Uri Slavkovsky, who's really developed his defensive side of the game, and credit where credit's due. Again, not a guy I root for or cheer for, but has grown substantially defensively at the very least. Right? There's been positives, but at the same time, you still need more from some of these other guys defensively, and you need kind of your team to buy into that team defense style of play, and that hasn't quite happened in Montreal. As a result, we saw Montembeault have to stand on his head last year. We kind of see some of that burnout this year, and you can kind of see that through the goaltender save percentages, right? A lot of them aren't very consistently great. I think they're all. God, I haven't even looked this up, but I'd be willing to guess they're all under 900%, 90%, however you want. Under 900 save percentage. That's a better way to put it. And usually when you consistently see that with a team's goaltenders, the team in front of them isn't necessarily defending all that well. NHL goaltenders in general are pretty solid. That's a conversation for another time. But that's just one of those several indicators of how the defense is playing, right? So St. Louis could be in the conversation at some point. I think there's still a lot this team needs to improve upon and work on from a coaching and development standpoint as well. And some of that might just be on the GM kind of getting some of those defensive leaders in that locker room and really kind of helping these guys learn that defensive style of game and get that buy-in. But, I don't think at this time, as good as St. Louis has been throughout his career, both as a player and a coach, I still do, and I have, and I still do have questions about his ability to coach the defensive side of the game. Um, so yeah, that's kind of where we're at. This is mostly my opinion. This is entirely my opinion, but I went through stats and all that, and rosters and depth charts and time on ice, and I did a lot more research than I intended to on this. This is supposed to be kind of a fun, spontaneous video, and it turned into a whole thing, but that's kind of where I'm at with all this so far. So, obviously, a lot of this is subjective. If you have difference of opinions, like, please share them. It's always fun. It's good, fun conversation. I've been talking too long. I'm starting to trip over my words. It's always fun conversation to have. And nobody's opinion is the same. So, if the season were to end today, I would probably have, in my personal opinion, if I was the only one voting, I would have Marco Sturm at number one. Knowing the system and how they vote for Coach of the Year, I think Jared Bednar is number one. I think Rod Brindamore is probably third. I'd probably give Sheldon Keefe I'd probably give Joel Quenneville number two. Yeah, so that's kind of where I'm at. So I appreciate you. I got to shorten up these videos somehow. I got to stop talking so much. But all right, take care.